Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. This week, in our weekly lesson, we're discussing education and indeed the changing face of education. Here in the UK, the government department that looks after education is known as the Office of Education. Its correct name is the Office for Standards in Education, and it's a bit longer than that. It's something like the Office for Standards in Education, Children and Skills, something like that anyway, and commonly abbreviated to Ofsted. Ofsted. Ofsted is the government department that looks after education. Now, in the UK government, we have many departments that begin with Off, just abbreviated from the word office. For example, Ofcom is the part of the government that deals with media. It's very interesting. We also have various others beginning with off. So sometimes when you read in the media and there's some kind of reference there to Ofsted, Ofcom, Ofgem is another one. That's the office that looks after energy, as far as I recall. There's many of them pop up in our daily lives, so you can see them in our media. Ofcom, Ofgem, Ofsted. Well, because we're talking about education, we're going to talk a little bit about Ofsted today, because when Ofsted are looking at schools to make sure that they are running very well, then these schools are simply given a one-word judgment, and the government's looking at changing that. So you can imagine the government visit every school in the UK, and then they give their award, and usually it's just one word. The school is outstanding, good, requires improvement, or inadequate. And that's all that the department, Ofsted, says about our schools. Now, presumably, they give a lot more background information as to why they've made that decision, but that's all we're told. Okay, your local school is outstanding, good, needs improvement. That's the only thing that we get to hear about. So there's a report in the Guardian newspaper today which talks about how that's about to change. Okay, so we're going to read that now. This is from the Guardian newspaper of today. The headline is Ofsted's single word school rating scrapped. And scrapped, as you know, is to throw away. When you put something in the trash, you scrap it. It says here, single word Ofsted judgments for state schools will be scrapped with immediate effect to be replaced by report cards aimed at improving standards and helping parents to better understand schools' strengths and weaknesses. The 4 existing headline ratings currently awarded by the inspections watchdog, that's Ofsted, they're the ones that oversee education, and the watchdog is a body which is set up to oversee it. So Ofsted is the watchdog which oversees education. A watchdog literally means a dog which stops burglars coming in or stops people harming a property. A Dalmatian might be a watchdog, for example. So the 4 existing headline ratings currently awarded by the inspections watchdog in England, outstanding, good, requires improvement, and inadequate, will go under radical changes announced by the government. State schools inspected this year will instead be graded on quality of education, behaviour, personal development, and leadership. Independent schools, that's basically private schools, early year settings, presumably that's something like kindergartens, colleges, and children's social care providers will also be asked to participate in this later. So that's very interesting, isn't it? The Union for Teachers welcomed the changes to the school inspection system, which has been promised by the Labour government for some time, even before they came into power. This will take effect from September 2025, and it will provide parents with a comprehensive assessment of how schools are performing, ensuring that inspections are more effective in driving improvements. It says here the government would continue to intervene in poorly performing schools to ensure high standards for children, the Department for Education said, amid some concerns that the changes could result in less oversight. Well, very interesting, but it makes me wonder what things are like now then. If they're proposing giving advice to schools, it sounds like schools aren't really getting a lot of advice right now. It says here, the Education Secretary said the need for Ofsted reform to drive high and rising standards for all of our children in every school is clear. All right, so she's pushing for Ofsted reform to actually reform the department, I think, the way that reads. It says here, let's see, yeah, there was a teacher who lived in Reading in Berkshire, and she apparently went through one of these government reports some years ago where they just give you, one word, and then she killed herself. She committed suicide. And the coroner, that's the man who deals with, dead bodies and how they died, he ruled that her suicide was contributed to by one of these Ofsted inspections. I wonder how you can tell that from a dead body. Seems a bit strange, isn't it? But apparently coroners have the power to ask colleagues and medical professionals about the woman and her behaviour, what she was like before she died. So the coroner, the man who looks after the reasons why someone died, he or she, just as the coroner, interviewed her colleagues and then made the decision that this was because of Ofsted's report. So that's triggering change in the system as well. And somebody here is saying, single word judgments are just the most visible feature of a fundamentally flawed inspection system. Ofsted's reign of terror has caused untold harm to head teachers and school staff for too long, with a negative impact on children's education. Well, I really wish someone would do the same with the IELTS system, because just to be told, yeah, your English, your spoken English is let's say, 6, your writing is a 7, your reading is a 6.5, and your listening is a 4. So we're going to give you an overall mark of 5. I mean, it's very demeaning. They don't give you any background information. They don't tell you anything. It's a little bit rough. And not only IELTS, but I think all of the systems are designed not to give you feedback so that you can't complain or make a big issue out of any of the marks. Very sad, very sad. So hopefully, if our school system changes, also the way the government handles things like IELTS will also change. IELTS is used by the British government to bring people in. People who want to come to work here, they do a type of IELTS. But the main IELTS exam, which most of you do if you're into IELTS, it's operated by the British Council, which is, well, it's associated with the British government. I'm not sure the government has direct power, but yeah, that's another issue. So I wish they would reform that, and that would save you a bit of money if they gave you some feedback, wouldn't it? Yeah. So that's an interesting story of today. And on the subject of education, there's also a headline here which says that the lack of investment in art schemes aimed at working class children, the lack of investment in art schemes aimed at working class children will create a cultural landscape that is whiter and posher, according to one of Britain's leading black British theatre directors. I don't think that reads well. Okay, so the lack of investment, the amount of money they're not putting into it, not putting into schemes aimed at the working class, will create a cultural landscape that is whiter and posher. But it's always been like that. I don't know why they think a lack of investment will only do that now. I mean, my generation growing up, if you were interested in the arts, you were hit across the head, and you were told to get back to the factory. You didn't have much of a choice. Yeah, you were hit in the head. Just corrected myself there because I was going to say hit in the head, but I was worried that perhaps you would interpret that as a verb or a participle, hitten. Yeah, you were hit in the head or on the head. You were smacked and told not to think of these things. So we already have that problem. I don't know why they think only now that it will be a whiter, posher type of landscape for the arts. But yeah, I mean, the arts, as we all know, are very expensive, and they've been kind of removed in many ways. Unless you come from a good family that knows about the arts, there's really no way into them. And that is a real sign of class here. We do still have a lot of people who call themselves working class and would shun the arts anyway, purely because they just don't get them. I write poetry, particularly about the area I come from, and I know that on social media I've received some very negative feedback from people around here who, wow, they just can't appreciate things like poetry. They see it as a waste of time, they see it as effeminate, and well, that's just where they're at. Yeah, so thankfully some of us moved on. Yeah, another thing here, just to close with, another headline in today's newspaper. The National Trust, that's the body that looks after our old buildings, such as castles, for example, Stonehenge, I think maybe the National Trust. There's another one as well called Visit England. Well, this one here, it says the National Trust reveals a rise in visitor numbers, but a drop in membership. And it says people are still prepared to spend money to come to visit some really old places, but the charity's annual report says membership has dropped, and people are more into paying to visit on the day, because if you're a National Trust member, then I think you pay £100 up front. And when you do that, you then have free entry to many places. Um, yeah, and they're a bit concerned about that just because they have to survive. Um, yeah, but it gets complex because there's a national trust and then there's the National Trust for Scotland. So I don't think you can just get one to travel around the whole country with, or the whole of the four countries as we're known these days. We're only one country, the UK, for the purposes of defense, aren't we, these days? Um, the report also highlighted a strong year for heritage with the acquisition of Munstead Woods, the former home of the pioneering gardener Gertrude Jekyll. Pioneering gardener. You see, this is just a good example. Never heard of her. Not the kind of thing that makes headline news. And there we are. That's it from me today. So hopefully you found this very helpful. Right. We'll talk again soon. And I wish you all a wonderful day. Bye.